In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 15 easy zero waste hacks. These are all things that I personally do in my home every day, and I wanted to share these with you. Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. And if you are new here, make sure that you subscribe and hit that like button. Also, go ahead and click the notification bell if you'd like to see more videos from myself. So like I said, today I'm going to be sharing with you 15 zero waste hacks. The first 10 have already been mentioned in 2 videos that I made at the very beginning of my channel, so I will link those up above and also in the description box down below. And since then, I've gone about my day-to-day life and realised that there are lots of things that I actually do that I haven't mentioned in those videos specifically, but I thought this would be a really good way to make one video that's more convenient for you to just run through all 15 of them. So let's just get right into it. As we know, I have a tendency to ramble when I get nervous on camera, so I'm going to try and do my best to keep this video as brief as possible. Okay, so number 1 is to repurpose mushroom punnet wrapping as cling film or food wrap. This is something that I do every day, and it's possibly one of my favourite repurposing zero waste hacks. Sometimes when you buy mushroom punnets, they come in this kind of film wrapper, and if you flip the box over, you can sometimes very carefully peel it away and end up with an entire sheet. I have a whole collection of them, and I haven't personally bought food wrap in over 2 years. This is a really great way to put something that's very wasteful, if you aren't able to buy your mushrooms loose, to a secondary use. Number 2 is reviving stale bread. Now when you get to the end of your loaf, rather than throwing away that last hard bit that does seem quite unappealing, you can just very gently sprinkle this with water, and without saturating it of course, then pop it in the toaster or pop it under the grill, however you prefer, and the bread will come out, the toast will come out crusty and crunchy and almost as good as new. This obviously prevents food waste and it's saving you pennies at the same time. Number 3 is to make stock from your veg scraps or peelings. This is nothing new, this is an old tradition. It's a really great way to preserve nutrients that are lost in the peelings that we often throw away or that end up in the compost bin. If you have too many, you can always store them in the fridge and build them up and then pop them in a pan and boil them with a little bit of water on low heat, add seasonings and herbs and spices, however you like to do it. I personally like to add turmeric and salt and pepper, and then you can fill up an old repurposed bottle or jar. You know exactly what's gone in it, and it's super healthy and completely zero waste. Okay, so number 4 only applies to you if you are able to do this, but that is to repurpose product packaging or wrapping or bags as bin liners. So unfortunately, when you can't buy things loose, often we get products that are still in plastic bags, and if your council allows for this, it's a really great way to avoid using bin liners. So I'll pop a photo up of what I mean, and my council allow me to do this, so it's a great way to, when you do unfortunately end up with packaging, but don't give yourself a hard time, or anything that isn't recyclable, to just fill these little bags up and then pop them out in your general waste landfill bin. I still have 2 large rolls of bin liners under my kitchen sink from previous homes that have not been used since I've lived here, and we have only put our general waste bin out once in the entire year that we've lived here. I do try to not give myself a hard time about the fact that I'm still generating unrecyclable landfill waste, but this is a really good way to make a bad situation into a slightly better one. Number 5 is to buy ingredients that will make multiple meals. So this is basically meal planning and batch cooking. It's a really great way to avoid food waste. So by this I mean, for example, I will go out and buy a cauliflower and a potato, and I will make a curry with one half of it, and then I will make a vegan cheese sauce with the other half of it. Often we end up with scraps or random bits of food in the fridge that don't really constitute a meal, and sadly often get thrown away. Food waste is a huge problem. So by meal planning, or kind of thinking about what meals you want to make before you go shopping, and writing out a list and trying to combine ingredients within those different meals, is a really great way to avoid food waste. Number 6 is to repurpose old envelopes, junk mail, receipts, any scrap bits of paper basically that you might have around the house, or that might unfortunately come through the letterbox. Sometimes this is inevitable, and to avoid using brand new paper or a new notebook, it's a really great way if you cut envelopes up, for example. That's something that I like to do. Anything that's blank, basically, that would otherwise go in the bin or in the recycling. I always have a to-do list on the go, and I particularly like them for shopping lists. So yeah, just try and repurpose any paper that comes into the house or that you have lying around to save you using anything new. Number 7 won't apply to you if you don't like this product, but if you do like Marmite, this is a really good way to avoid waste, and that is to make stock out of the last little layer in the inside of the jar. If you're a Marmite or yeast extract lover like myself, then you'll know that it's always sometimes a bit difficult to get that last little bit on the knife out of the jar. So a good way to reuse this last little bit is to fill the jar up with boiling water. Obviously be very careful. I always put mine in the sink when I do this, just to be on the safe side, and then let it do its magic for a couple of minutes. Once it's cooled, pop the lid on, give it a little shake, and there you have your own stock. It's a really great way to add a kind of meaty, salty flavour to things such as chili, and you've literally saved that last little bit from going in the bin. So number 8 is to repurpose fruit net bags as scrubbers. So if, for example, you buy your limes or your oranges or your lemons in a bag, I always try to buy them loose, but this isn't always possible, and I often get my lemons from the reduced aisle, which I've mentioned loads in the past. It's the net bag that they come in is actually a really good alternative to a scrubber. It is a very wasteful item in itself, but we aren't always able to buy things loose, so don't give yourself a hard time, and this is a great way to put it to second use. Obviously make sure to keep the metal clasps off of the surface that you're scrubbing, but yeah, I still have one by the kitchen sink. It's been there for weeks, and it's an absolutely brilliantly powerful tool at scrubbing anything from bathrooms to kitchens, and it prevents it from going straight into landfill. Okay, so number 9 is to use the water that you've used to steam vegetables to boil other things in. Now, this is a really good way to preserve those nutrients that get left in that water. It's also a good way to prevent water waste, and yeah, it's just a great way to put water that's already been used instead of just throwing it straight down the drain, which sometimes we don't even think about it. But yeah, just save any cooking water that you've used to steam your vegetables in. You can always pop it into another pan, top it up a little bit, and say, for example, boil some potatoes in it. Number 10 is to save napkins or condiments or cutlery or any sort of disposable single-use items that you may end up with when you get takeout, or even if you go to a cafe or a restaurant. Now, this is something that I personally try to avoid, but I have accumulated a lot of it over time. It's always best to decline that, but even sometimes in restaurants and cafes, they'll automatically give you napkins and things like that. So at the end of your meal, for example, it often does just get wiped off the table and go straight in the bin. Take it home with you. It's a really good alternative to disposable paper or kitchen towels. I couldn't think of the word. I haven't personally bought kitchen roll for over 2 years because I just use the napkins that we've gotten from either restaurants or takeaways, and I also like to keep any salvaged condiments, so such as little ketchup sachets. They are incredibly wasteful, so try to decline them if you can, but I keep them in a little jar, and they are really quite convenient for barbecues or any days out and things like that. So number 11 is to only fill the kettle up with the amount of water that you actually need. Now, like I said, these last 5 are going to be frugal hacks that I've thought of as I've gone along that I didn't even realise that I do, and I wanted to share these with you. So this may seem like a bit of a silly one, but there's no point filling up an entire kettle of water just for 1 or 2 cups of tea, for example. So try and judge. There's usually a gauge on an electric kettle, or try and gauge how much water it is that you usually, I mean, you could even measure out your mug and then pour the water in. Allow for a little bit extra for condensation and evaporation. The energy that it requires to boil an entire kettle of water just for a small amount is quite wasteful. So yeah, try and only fill the kettle up with the amount of water that's actually needed. Okay, so number 12 has been previously kind of touched upon in this video already, and that is about reusing water. So I mentioned about using steaming water for reboiling other things, but that also applies to using water that you've used to boil things in for other purposes. So for example, if you've boiled pasta or rice and you haven't used salt, Once you've let that cool, it's a really good thing to use to water your plants. It's incredibly nutritious for them, and as long as it doesn't contain any salt and it's been allowed to cool, this is a great way to repurpose that water. If you've boiled vegetables, for example, you can reuse that water. You can save it and reuse it to make homemade stock, like I mentioned at the beginning. Just anywhere that you find yourself filling something up a bit too much or having any excess water, just try and use it for something else. Try and store it somewhere else and then reuse it the next day, or even just if it's clean water, just pop it back in your kettle for the next cup of tea. Anywhere that you can save water is a really great way, obviously, to save money, and it's also much better for the planet. Okay, so number 13, as a word of caution, please don't do anything that is not suitable for your home environment or that is dangerous, but that is to leave the oven door open once you finish cooking and make use of that heat. So obviously if you have children or pets, this isn't something that I would advise. Obviously this is at your own discretion. I currently don't have pets or children in the home, so this is something that I like to do every time I cook, and I just switch the oven off, leave the door open, and it's a great way to reuse that heat that otherwise kind of just goes to waste. Number 14 has been mentioned in previous different videos, and that is to save your citrus fruit or peelings and to use them as a homemade DIY cleaner. So I will pop a link up of the video where I mention this. I make my own cleaning solution, and I do this by saving up my orange or my lemon peels and I soak them in vinegar, and I have my own toxic free natural cleaning spray. It's really effective, it smells lovely, and it's a really great way to avoid waste. And so finally, in at number 15, obviously if this isn't something that appeals to you, please don't do it, but these are just my personal hacks and tips that I want to share, and that is to not flush the toilet every time you have a wee. Now, if this grosses you out, obviously just don't do it. It's up to you. But I think there is an old saying, is it if it's yellow, leave it mellow, if it's brown, flush it down. So I don't mean to gross anybody out, but I know people that do this. It requires a lot of water every time you flush the toilet just for a pee. I'm not saying to leave, bacteria or germs to accumulate. Even if you flush the toilet every other time you have a wee, that is going to be a lot better than every time. And like I said, this is just at your own discretion. If this isn't something that appeals to you, then don't worry about it. But it's just one of those things that often we don't think about, and it's a really great way to save a lot of water. So there you have it. There were my 15 updated zero waste hacks all in one video for you. I hope that you found this content useful. If you did, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up. I'm really grateful for your support. I'm trying to continue making content that doesn't involve me being in pain or moving my hand too much, which is proving to be a little bit difficult. But yeah, thank you for joining me in today's video. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Stay safe. Bye.